This sound familiar? You're reading a book and you get to the end of a paragraph and think, what the hell did I just read? Or worse, you walk by books that you know you've already read and you come up blank with what was in them. The problem is that your brain isn't actually designed to retain that much. At least that's my go-to excuse when my girlfriend asks me for the third time why I still haven't taken out the trash. No, babe, you don't understand. See, your brain isn't designed to hold that. But in this video, we're gonna fix that. I wanna show you how I remember everything I read. Yes, I am drawing a pyramid. No, I am not going to sell you a get-rich-quick scheme, timeshare, or dropshipping course. I promise, it's not a pyramid scheme, guys. Edgar Dale in 1969 came up with what is called the cone of learning, essentially stating that there's 6 levels to learning. After 2 weeks, you tend to remember only 10% of what you read. You remember roughly 20% of what you hear and 30% of what you see. Now, hopefully you can start to see the problem here. Every 10 words, you're gonna remember 1. 10% ain't that good. When you start combining these, it gets interesting. You remember 50% of what you see and hear, 70% of what you say, 90% of what you say and do. Those first 4 you can think of as passive learning, versus the last 2 are active. In short, the secret is that if you want to retain more, you want memory hacks, you gotta flip how you're approaching reading. It's not a passive act of what you do, it is an active form of what you're doing. I think it's important to say here that I was never a strong reader. In school, got diagnosed early on with dyslexia. In college, I would always have to reread things and go to study hall and get extra help. I was not someone who curled up on the couch on a Saturday with a good book. I resisted, and I would even say despised reading for a long time because of how hard it was for me. Still is hard. That said, minimum, I try to bang out 3 books a month. And so these tips directly come from that. From someone who was not a strong reader, still isn't a strong reader, but I just have to, and I actually like reading now for the work I do. So the very first thing I do, a lot of times I won't even read the book. I'll get it on Audible. Audible is like one of my favorite apps. When I look at my screen time, it's always one of the most used on there. Some people are like, oh, that's cheating, that's not actually reading. Whatever, you're getting the same information. Now, what I'll do is I'll order the physical book on Amazon, and I'll also download it on Audible, so I have 2 formats. Now, the best hack, if you're going after just sheer retention, and this works more with nonfiction, chances are you're trying to retain the nonfiction info, like no one's really like taking notes and trying to retain all these fiction books. So what I'll do is I'll put the Audible at 1.7 speed, 1.5. As it's going, I'll follow along in the book, in the physical book. Now, here's why this works. You can hear and take in information faster than you can speak it. Most of us do a bad habit called sub-vocalizing when we read. When you're reading the book, in your mind, you're actually saying the words. That really slows you down. The narrator can read at 1.7 speed, you can follow along and still get that double comprehension like we showed you in the cone of learning, where when you see and hear something at the same time, boosts the retention massively. The second hack I do, for most books, I'll do a 1-page summary. And I'll get some B-roll shots of this so you can see a little bit of what we write in here. But this is on the courage to be disliked. And I'll go chapter by chapter what some of the best ideas were from that. I'll apply it to my life. I'll add on any other concepts that make sense, try and do like a logic tree branch in there. I've journaled now for pretty much a decade, and I've been doing this every single journal. What's really cool is that now, instead of going through the whole book, finding it, carrying it around, going through to where the good ideas were, you can just flip open to your journal, and throughout the year, you'll have 10, 20 of these even. You can just get the big ideas directly from yourself. Now, I don't do this for every single book. I find that's overkill. But if there's like a top 10, 20% books where I'm like, oh man, I'm getting a lot out of this, I'll definitely do the 1-page summary. Some people use the app Notion. Personally, for me, I'm an old school pen to paper kind of guy. I think that my hippie belief here is that your handwriting carries a lot of energy behind it. And when you see your handwriting from like 8 years ago, it almost takes you back to that time, and it's a cool way you can communicate with your past, present, and future self. I don't know if you can get that through text and pixels on a little screen. Look at a college essay you wrote 5 years ago or whatever. I mean, do you really care? It's just words on a page. My next hack is to get moving. If you choose to go the audiobook route, which I love, do something with your body. Before it was 115 degrees for months on end here in Arizona, my evening routine after I got off work, I would take an audiobook and I would go up and down the golf courses. There's this beautiful little green belt. I would listen to a book for an hour. When you work from home, all your days and hours can kind of just like blend together. And so that was a great way to just have a solid endpoint to the day, going on that walk. And when I come back, I'm off of work. I would do some damage when it came to reading books that way. Another way I did this, and don't make fun of me here, I know this is something your grandma probably does. I love puzzles. So I would order just like 10, 20 puzzles on Amazon Prime, get them shipped here, and every single book I would do a different puzzle for. It got so bad that my girlfriend was like looking at the stack of 10, 20 puzzles. I had to put them in a bag and take them to storage. We had so many. What's crazy is that you almost develop a photographic memory with audio books and puzzling. Is that a verb? Puzzling? Being puzzled? Nah. I can look at some of the ones that I did and immediately flash back to the book I was reading, listening to while doing it. It's crazy. It's theorized that doing something with your body while reading or taking in information reduces the psychological stress and workload of your brain, new information. When you're more chilled out, you're more zened out. Do you think you're more open or closed off to information? Open. It's easier for you to take in things when you're in that relaxed state. My next tip, rough it up. Some people have like OCD with books where they're afraid to damage it, scrape it, write in it. The thought of doing that is just like, I can't damage this book. I don't think there's anything sacred about text on a page. So I underline, I highlight, I write in the margins, I do pretty much everything, dog ear the pages. I get really rough with it. Call it names, spit on it, dirty little self-help book. Jesus Christ. Let's keep it PG here. You know what's nice? Not having sponsorships on these videos. The reason is because we self-sponsor these videos. We have a 10-week program called Metamorphic, where we helped over 500 people just like you create and shift into what we call the 2.0 version of you. Results are absolutely amazing, and it's because we hit self-improvement from two angles. The first angle, self-improvement, getting crystal clear on who this 2.0 version of you is, how to design it, almost like a dream character in a movie or a game. Walk you through this step by step, give you a full breakdown of how to do this, the best form of manifestation you can do out there, in my opinion. And I've seen it. People get new jobs, new relationships, develop laser-like clarity that they haven't had in 5 years that they can use for the next 10. But the second is the self-healing aspect. And in week 3, we go super deep through a process we designed called inner shadow shifting. Gets to the root of your core stories that are holding you back, preventing you from getting to that next level of growth, relieving past traumas that are ingrained deeply in you, and anything that would keep you stuck in the 1.0 version of you. If you're curious about it, I'll link down below a free training. It'll just go a bit more into the process. You can also hear from some of those 500 students, give their own words and experience on it. They were just like you on the other side, watching YouTube videos and decided to make the call and come on into the community. Back to the video. You can always buy a new one. Like this book, love this book, Happiness Hypothesis, Jonathan Haidt. This one was so roughed up and so written in, that I got the hardcover one and it was like $15 on Amazon. No one's gonna go broke buying books. That's another little hack here, is that whenever I get a book recommendation from someone that I trust or look up to or value their opinion on, I immediately one-click purchase it on Amazon. Unlimited spending budget on books. I don't ever think twice. And I did this even when I was broke in my mom's basement. This isn't something you have to have money for. I mean, we're talking $5, $10, $7 used on Amazon. People spend that on a Chipotle burrito every day. While we're on that point, another tip here, just because you buy a book doesn't mean you have to read it immediately for it to be a win. I've had books that I'll order, one click on Amazon, that will literally sit on the shelf for a year, 2 years even, and I won't even think about it. Then I'll be going through something in my life, let's just say relationships, and I'll be like, oh yeah, I have that book on relationships. I'll go to it and it hits me way better because I'm in the right state for it. So don't ever beat yourself up or feel bad that you have books that you haven't read on you. I think we're conditioned through school and university to finish every single book cover to cover that we start. And if we don't, we somehow failed. It's complete nonsense. There's books you should read cover to cover, But here's another little tip on the concept of what you should actually be reading and where you should spend a bulk of your time. Specifically with nonfiction, you ever notice this pattern? If you divide the book into 3, the first third of the book is the author telling you why you bought the book, your problem. So unless that's really good and I'm really curious about it, I'll oftentimes just skip the first third, go to parts 2 and 3 where the meat is. Sometimes I'll pre-read the book by just looking at the table of contents, and I'll go to immediately what's most interesting and relevant to where I'm at in life. Start there. That's the good thing about nonfiction. You don't necessarily have to go in linear order. And then some books, if I get 10% through and I'm just like, man, I'm not feeling this thing, or I don't vibe with this author, I'll skip the book. You may or may not come back to it, but you just saved yourself 10 hours of reading. The next tip, if you remember that cone of learning at the bottom there, what you say and do, engaging, being an active process, not a passive one, is one of the best ways to retain more of what you read. So I find that one way to flip that switch from passive to active, flip the conversation from a monologue that the author is giving you to a dialogue that you're having with the author. How do you do this? Couple ways here. This is what I call devil's advocate. So if you read a point and something doesn't sit right with you, or you could see it from a different angle, I write DA in the margins and I argue with it. What do you disagree with? That's a cool way you can start developing your own opinions and start passing information through your own filter, your truths, instead of just accepting every single thing you read in a book at face value as true. Second little tip here, this is cool. So anytime I reread a book, I'll put a little note here of when I read it and some notes about where I'm at in life. So for this, I've read this book several times, 2019, 2020, 2022, 2021, and I'll make notes about like moving to Arizona, where my YouTube channel's at, just any 1 or 2 points about where your life's at a snapshot in time. You really want to get organized. This takes a little more forethought. Color code when you read it. So if you read it once, maybe that's pink. You second read through, that's blue. Second read through, that's black. And so when you're highlighting, arguing, making notes and margins and whatnot, you know what year and what stage of your life you're in with those thoughts. It's a cool way you can see your past self and how you've evolved over time. Last tip here on transforming it from a monologue to a dialogue. At the end of every chapter, there's always like a paragraph that's blank. You can write a few points of what you learned from that book in that section, and then transfer it into your journal if you really want to go for it, or just leave it there. When I first got into reading nonfiction books, I had the benefit of making YouTube videos. So what I did is just distill down the 10 big ideas I got from the books that I was reading and made a YouTube video on them. They became some of our most viewed videos and really jump-started our YouTube career. But I learned that by teaching it and just sharing it and recording it in some form really ingrained the information deeper within me. And now when I coach people, I have that knowledge bank to pull from and share and coach people with. So for you, maybe it's not practical for everyone to just make a YouTube video on it or a podcast or a blog entry, but I think that doing that 1-page summary in your journal, you kind of do that. One frame you could use is what are the 10 big ideas I got from this book, and write out your 10 big ideas. It's a bit of a structure you can add to the 1-page journal entry that works. I know how overwhelming reading books and information can be. We say it all the time on this channel, but most people, if they're honest, the information, the education they're trying to get has become entertainment for them. And so they need a way to flip the switch and start implementing it and living at the 2.0 version of them. That's what we do in our Metamorphic program. Again, if you're interested in that, I'll link it down below where you can speak to one of our coaches for free, see if we can help. Don't let another year go by where you're saying you're gonna make big changes, where you're saying it's gonna be your year, where you write down your goals and then in 12 months you look at them and you check off maybe one. Make this your year to really go all in. And speaking of reading lots of material and lots of books, I know you like it because you're here. I read over 300 nonfiction ones, and when I look at the patterns that I started realizing, came down to 3. 3 things that they were all saying essentially boiled down. So if you want to know those 3 lessons, I put it in a YouTube video. I'll link up right here. It's a fantastic follow-up to what you're watching now. I'll go over the 3 best lessons I learned reading 300 books. I'll see you there.